Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is John. I'm here doing a collective reading today. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for returning and giving me another shot. If you're new here, thank you for checking me out. I'm sorry that I haven't posted anything sooner. I'd wanted to post another video after my last one, but it just did not materialize. And there's been a lot of whack-a-mole kind of energy, where it's like you're trying to do something and then the whack-a-mole pops up. So I've been fighting off the whack-a-moles, moving through the density. The last couple of weeks, Pisces season in general felt like molasses for me. Lots of naps, lots of lethargy, and lots of unpacking the coulda, shoulda, woulda type of energy of the past. Because I was feeling very down and out about the now moment. And regretting my own personal decisions or coulda, shoulda, wouldas of the past, and then having like an anxiety towards the future, right? So that's kind of what I came into the reading trying to get an idea of like what is it that we're moving through, what's happening there with these different timelines of reality, and I don't know, what can we expect moving forward? What's the guidance? I've had these cards out on the table for like a week and I just couldn't get a full story. It was like I felt like I wasn't saying anything. And I've recorded this maybe like 1,000 times and I feel like I've stopped in the middle of it because it just feels like I'm not saying anything. I just feel like it's silly or just like empty words that don't mean anything. So this time I'm doing it. I'm doing the full video. It's going to be amazing. And yeah, if you're interested in booking a personal reading with me, I really love to do those. I have the time to do it right now, so you can see all of the information for that in the description box below. And if you have already ordered a personal, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, so let me just jump into this. Okay, bottom of the deck and the split. We're following the leader into the storm fields. And the leader, I would say, is our own intuition. You can see on this card, follow the leader, it's all birds. So that talks to me, if you've ever smudged with a feather, you notice how like the feather has this ability to kind of like pick up subtle magnetic energy. It's like you can just kind of feel what birds feel for a second. So that's why it's like follow the leader. I feel like this is about following our own intuition, following that inner compass that points towards our true north. And what we've followed that into is the storm fields, where it's like we have to pass through this storm field in order to get to our true north. But the problem with the storm field is that it's like the dirty electromagnetic energy that's in this space is so intense, so dense, that I feel like our inner compass is kind of spinning, where it's almost like, I think, isn't it like if you fly over the pyramids, right? Like your GPS will go crazy for a second. It has that kind of energy where it's like the GPS is going crazy because the space that we're in is so chaotic. But I think this storm field space, to me, I think is the actual literal firewall to the matrix itself, where it's like, in order to exit the matrix, you need to pass through this firewall that is the storm field. And the reason why I think that is because the Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer, John Dee, so this is back Elizabethan era, 1500s, 1600s, whatever, he developed that system of like Enochian magic, right, where he's dealing with all the different angels or whatever. And personally, it's like, obviously the Elizabethan times did not have electricity, technology, computers, right? So nobody in Elizabethan times was ever going to be talking about simulation theory or holographic reality or a matrix. But what's really interesting about John Dee is that it's like, it seems like he fully understood that, but within the context of Hermeticism, I guess you could say. But in terms of pocket dimensions, reality, escaping reality, there's a lot of interesting. Tracy Twyman actually did a lot of interesting reports, I guess you would say, about John Dee. I don't know if any of it is still on the internet, but if you can find it, that's really what cracked me open into looking into him. But in his system of Enochian magic, there is an entity that he called Choronzon, Chorozon, and this entity is effectively like the personification of the firewall. That if you want to exit the Matrix, you have to pass through this firewall that he referred to as Choronzon. And it's like associated with this dirty electromagnetic kind of energy. And so that's really where I have that thought. But the principle of Choronzon is that he manifests as, or it manifests as, whatever it is that you're afraid of, whatever it is that would discourage you from exiting the Matrix. So the best example that I can think of is if you've seen the most recent Matrix movie, the fourth one, it's like every time Neo convinces Trinity, or even, not even convinces, but every time Trinity is presented with the choice point that would allow her to either exit the Matrix or connect with Neo or whatever you want to say, something would pop up that would appeal to her fear, that would discourage her from connecting any further. And so I think in the final scene when like he finally does say, like, you know, we can leave the Matrix if you want to come with me, Trinity's there, she's kind of like, okay, like I want to, I know it's right, but then boom, the phone rings, and it's, oh my god, so-and-so broke their leg, and then the husband shows up, and oh my god, the house is on fire. It's like that kind of stuff where it's appealing to the fear, where it's like, if I say no to this, I'm the biggest bad person in the world, and I need to, you know, do the right thing, and blah, blah, blah. So that, I think, is very much so the energy that we're moving through right now. There's going to be a lot of conflict, coulda, shoulda, woulda, doubt, regret, fear, all of that. If you are experiencing all of that, it's because of this space that we're moving through, which is, again, the firewall. It is, another example I can think of is like the demilitarized zone, the border between North and South Korea, right? It's like there's this 10 feet of space that doesn't belong to anybody. And again, the name Choronzon, or Choronzon, whatever it is, it effectively, it's kind of like timeline. It kind of means time zone, but it's more of like time zone container, where, yeah, it's the container for the time zone. It's the firewall. So as we're passing through it, it's like, I feel like this firewall is shared between numerous realities. So there's like this bleed through, and it's messy, and there's different timelines available that kind of flicker in and out. But again, it's so chaotic that it's like it's hard to properly calibrate the GPS and get a clear sense of direction. So that's where I think that we are. I think that we're passing through this DMZ. I think that we're passing through this storm field. And on the other side of it is going to be this new timeline for which personally I don't think that we all go to the same place. I think we go to wherever it is that we're meant to go. But we are leaving this older collective. And the first two cards that are out on the table here are the Ghostlands card and then the Intention card. And Ghostlands is kind of the same thing that I was saying, like the DMZ, where it's like, it's the importance of staying in the now moment, because being in the future or past can freeze you in a type of way. Because that's kind of like the Choronzon energy, is that it wants to freeze you. It's trying to discourage progress. It's trying to discourage you from going any further into this space. It's trying to make you think that you made the wrong decision, right? Coulda, shoulda, woulda. And it's trying to get you to manifest anything, right? Because, and even to say it's like, I don't think we're dealing with an actual entity, but it's more or less like, it's like an obstacle course, right? Where it's just like a time-sensitive kind of thing where, I don't know, I'm just thinking Indiana Jones, where it's like, you step into the temple and something senses that you're there, right? There's like a tripwire, and that releases the giant ball that now you have to run away from, right? The ball doesn't get released until somebody steps into the tunnel. So we have stepped into the tunnel, and therefore that's why the ball has been released, if that makes sense. But Ghostlands, it's also reminding me of the game Operation. If you remember, like the kids' game, the board game, where there would be like the image of the dude that's on the operating table, and there's all the holes, and you have to pick out the organs or whatever. But if you touch the sides of the hole, it shocks the individual, and I guess you lose. So that's what this is saying in terms of the now moment, where it's like dwelling on the past or the future will shock you. In like a negative way, that it'll freeze you up in a type of way. And I know, saying, oh, be in the now moment, guys. It's so love and light, and it's so annoying, because it's like, what the hell does it even mean? But what this means to me is making peace with the fact that wherever you find yourself right now is very purposeful. That it's not a mistake, that it's not something you should regret or beat yourself up over, but it's that DMZ, we're in this kind of no man's land, where it's like, if things haven't taken root for you or grown fruit, or if manifestation has been hard or clunky or chunky, it's simply because of the space that we're in. It's not really you, but it's like, you can't really grow things in the desert, and we're passing through a desert. Actually, that's literally the center card on the spread here, is the dry desert, which speaks about recognizing that it's like there's nothing out there. All that there is here is you, or whatever is in here. And that's what the Coron Zone energy reacts to, is whatever's in here. Which also brings up the stories of like passing through the underworld, right? Where it's like, in the Egyptian version at least, you had to deal with Anubis, and he was going to weigh your heart against the feather of truth and determine whether or not you can pass through the underworld. And what that says to me is that it's like our heart code is almost like, I wanted to say ID, like identification, because I'm thinking of this in terms of like a game, right? Imagine if this was like just a game, just a holographic reality, just some sort of simulation that we got stuck inside of. I feel like in order to exit the game, right, I would want to reconnect with my body, right? If this is just a digital avatar, it's like I would be reconnecting with something outside of that. But from what we understand, we're not the only ones in here, right? There's many, many people in here. So it's like, I need to make sure that I reconnect with the right body, which means I need to know who I am. And who I am is my heart code. And the reason why Anubis is weighing your heart against the feather of truth is because basically it's like you need to disconnect from the illusion. Because if you still think you are the illusion, if you still think that you are the Matrix, it's like you can't get out of it, because you can't bring that with you. It's not you. And so that's personally what I think that process is referring to, the Egyptian journey through the underworld. Not even Egyptian, it's the Tibetan version, it's every version. It's the same story of like needing to go through this kind of like defrag process, this like cleansing process in order to get out, because you can't. It's like if I reconnected with my external body, with my body that's outside of the Matrix, and brought those programs into it, I don't know what would happen, but it wouldn't be good, I don't think. So that's what I think we're really kind of going through, is a matter of really just kind of disconnecting from the illusion. And that's why these first two cards, it was Ghostlands and then Intention. This, I personally feel, it's like this is the data, these are the cookies that would correspond to the new reality that we're moving towards. Where it's like the old reality that we're used to had an algorithm or a set of cookies that corresponded to that rendered that was the support for that. And this is the support for the new reality, but I feel as though it's kind of like, it's incubating, right? And it seems like it's not going to hatch as a chick, it's going to be fully grown. But it's almost like being smuggled through this space, or protected through this space, where it can't actually manifest yet. And the next two cards on the table, if I can pick them up, Magic Prayer and Fields of Dreams, is kind of indicating that that's all happening on the astral, that this entire, whatever's contained here, really only exists in this kind of like astral, abstract, energetic form. And little by little, there's these little cracks that are coming through, where it's giving me the analogy of like the Natural History Museum, where there's all of those vignettes behind glass, right? Where it's like the cavemen over here and the Egyptians over there. And what I've noticed personally is that it's like as the old timeline is collapsing, I'm seeing the new timeline come to fruition, but it's coming to fruition as though it's behind glass, where I can observe it, I can familiarize myself with it, I see the new characters lining up in the new scenes and settings, but I can't actually occupy that space yet, for whatever reason. And I feel like primarily the reason why this is not hatching in this space yet is because it's the weighing the feather against the heart of truth kind of thing. Is that it's like, or weighing the heart against the feather of truth, excuse me. It's like as long as there's still illusions on my heart, I really can't occupy that space yet, because it's like those programs will manifest. And effectively it'll just be another iteration of the same timeline that we're trying to leave. And that's why in this demilitarized zone that we're moving through, this 10 feet between the old and the new, all of this shit is coming up, and all of this density and all of this anxiety, because it's a matter of clearing it, processing it, seeing it, disconnecting from it, whatever that is. And that's literally the next two cards on the table, cleaning house and then solitude, right? So it's like an individual inside job being kind of locked on an island. And the cleaning house is happening right next to the field of dreams. So it's like as we clear this baggage out, it's like this will become more accessible. But again, it's just a matter of clearing that out, and it's like it's something we can really only kind of do for ourselves. Where I don't have a good analogy for it, but it's something about like an algorithm where it's like if I guess maybe it's like that teach a man to fish kind of thing, and you can feed him for life, but if you just give him a fish, I don't know if that's the right analogy. I'm thinking again in terms of algorithms, where it's like there's something about the learning aspect that changes things internally, and that can't be handed to you for whatever reason. In terms of mythology, there is an analogy of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice trying to escape the underworld. Because Eurydice, she got bit by a snake, she died. Orpheus was beside himself, so he was able to convince Hermes to let him go into the underworld to try to talk to Hades and Persephone and say, hey, can I get my girl back? And Orpheus had the lyre, the lyra constellation, like the harp, and with those tones he was able to get to the center of the underworld, so he was able to lullaby Cerberus, the three-headed dog, and play all these different songs that would just effectively get him where he needed to go, right? I don't know if I had said this initially, but it's like on these cards on the bottom of the split, there were these two paths here, right, that were leading towards the storm fields. And it was looking like frequencies to me, like following these frequencies, or generating these frequencies, maybe. But effectively, Orpheus was able to use sound, use vibration, use frequency to get past all of these different boogeymen into the heart of the underworld, into the court of the underworld, which I think we've already passed through, personally. I don't know, it kind of loops, but either which way. He gets to the court of the underworld, he plays a song that's so beautiful that Hades is crying and blah blah blah. So they agree to let Eurydice go back to Earth, or the surface, or whatever. But they say to Orpheus, you have to go ahead of her, and you cannot turn around. You can't help her. If you turn around, she gets pulled back, and she got to start over. So Orpheus is like, okay, fine. He's running ahead, everything's good, and then at a certain point, he loses his connection with her. He can't hear her anymore. He can't feel her anymore. He doesn't know if she's still behind him. So he gives in to his own fears, his own coronzone, and he turns around. And in that moment, he realizes she's right behind him. But then when she sees him turn around, she gets pulled all the way back to the beginning. and he's devastated. And my personal interpretation of that, in unpacking that, is that it's not like Hades grabbed her or punished her because, Orpheus broke the rules or something like that. I think the primary issue was it was the individual inside job thing, where Eurydice needed to get herself out. Orpheus could not actually do the journey of the underworld thing for her. She needed to do that journey on her own, for whatever reason. It was about her own deprogramming, defrag process, etc., etc. And turning around, it was kind of like a trust thing, right? Where it was like he did not trust in that moment that she was behind him, that she could do it on her own. He, if anything, was skeptical or doubtful that she was okay. And from Eurydice's perspective, I think that when he turned around, she knew in that moment that he did not think she was strong enough to do it on her own. And perhaps in seeing that, she herself did not think she was strong enough. And then it's like the doubt kind of pulled her back. But in the same respect, it's like coming at this from the light worker's perspective, whatever the hell you want to call yourself, we're all making this journey through the underworld collectively. You know as well as anybody, you cannot wake people up. It don't work. If somebody is fully committed to an illusion, it doesn't matter what evidence you present to them, they will most likely double down, triple down on whatever it is, and it will create tremendously more distance between you and them. Right? That seems to be the way. I don't know a story yet of a time when somebody, sat down and woke somebody up and it was just like, oh wow, here we are. It's usually the opposite, right? It's usually you lose that connection, right? Which is effectively what happened with Orpheus and Eurydice. It was like he lost her in that moment. So it's about trusting that everybody can kind of make their own way through, but more so trusting that you can make your own way through, right? Even beyond trying to help other people. It's really kind of that. The next couple of cards on the table here, I kind of want to do all three at once, but it's the Dragon's Lair, the Talisman, and then the Goblin's card. And this is giving me kind of like a crossroads energy, because these two energies are really mirroring each other to me. Because Dragon's Lair, as imposing as this looks, really talks about protective energy and is a very benevolent kind of card to pull. Whereas the Goblin's card is very much so about dealing with shadow aspects, facing shadow aspects of yourself. It's very much so what you would meet in the Crone Zone area, where everybody has like versions of themselves that other people have projected onto them, whereas people might, maybe people have said that you're whatever it is that they've said that you are, that you're not, right? Where it's like, my name is John, so it's like there are other versions of John out there that people have kind of written into their own story, ideas of me that are not true, that have almost like metastasized to my beingness because they've been projected onto me so strongly, where even though that person's sense of my personality is completely an illusion, it's like they still see it, they still experience it, and then it gains a life of its own, almost like a tulpa or an egregore. And that's what the goblins kind of mentioned to me. Whereas Dragon's Lair would be those aspects of our self that we're intimidated by, even though they're benevolent, right? Where it's like, maybe you have your dragon aspect, right? And that's this really kind of powerful thing. But how many times have dragons been depicted as evil, right? Or demonic in some sort of sense. So even if it is a benevolent kind of source. So I feel like the Talisman card, again, this is about crystallized wisdom, right? So it's about that which you know because you know. You know because you've seen it with your own eyes, been there, done that kind of stuff. And I was mentioning before that there were these two kind of winding paths, right? And the Talisman card, she has that winding path before her as well. So I almost feel like it almost feels like she's dowsing in a type of way to try to find the right path. and is stuck between this Dragon's Lair and Goblin's card of like which way to go. And I'm not even saying that this is where we are right now. I think that this is more or less last couple of months, last couple of years in terms of what's led us into this space where the GPS doesn't work. Because I feel like she's at a crossroads and she doesn't know which one is the good one, but it's like I feel like she's pulling towards the goblins because the goblins is presenting as more benevolent even though it's really not. And what I mean by that is it's like it's almost like false twin flame kind of energy, right? Where it's like it's very familiar because it looks like you, or it looks like whatever it is that you think that you should be headed towards, but it's really just kind of like this lure to kind of pull you into this space. And the space that it pulled us into was this dry desert where there's nothing but ourselves, right? Which is exactly, that's when you would encounter these goblins, because they are things that are kind of attached to your own ego or sense of self. And the next two cards on the table here, right after Dry Desert, are Peaks of Joy, followed by Rock Bottom. I don't know if it was like this or like that. But the absolute high and the absolute low. And it's like once I personally was lured into this space in like the last year or so, right? Going into it with this kind of like feeling of intimidation of like, is it the right thing? It looks good, but I'm not sure if it's the right thing. Since I've moved into that space, it's like I've experienced some of the highest highs and lowest lows that I've ever experienced, and it's like bookended, right? It's just one after the other after the other. Just like all of the paths that are listed here, right? These winding kind of paths that go up and down and up and down. And it's interesting because it's like this is happening, that up and down is happening right beneath Field of Dreams and Cleaning House. And Field of Dreams has all of these cracked eggs on it. And I do feel as though there's like something to do with the rhythm of that high-low cycle that we've been through that had something to do with like cracking the egg that we're trying to get out of. Something about that. That's like little by little kind of breaking this process open. Because I mean, literally right after the Rock Bottom card is the Wide Open card, which is kind of why I'm saying that, where it's like because Rock Bottom, it's talking about dead end paths, right? Where it's like you can't go this way any further. It's obsolete, and that's what I was feeling with the Cleaning House energy, which is right above that, where once all of the obsolete dead end paths are kind of cleared out, that's when things are just like completely wide open. There's like this metamorphosis energy. And what's fascinating too is that it's like, do I want to go here or do I want to go there? I'll go here. Wishing Well was the card that was clarifying the last reading that I did. It's called Cookies Are Crucial, I think, on the channel. And this was like an overall energy card. And what this was talking to me about was the butterfly effect, cause and effect, where, is that what it's called? Cause and effect? Yeah. Where it's like the ripple effect, right? Where you throw the stone into the water and you see the ripples come out, and then eventually those things bounce back like a feedback loop, and that's what manifests reality. And what I'm seeing here is the Wishing Well card followed by the Flying card. This to me is rendering as that butterfly effect energy, those ripples kind of heading out. And I'm really seeing this as like timelines, like a wrecking ball that's just going through all of these different timelines, these like false timelines or looping timelines that we're trying to collapse or delete or whatever. And this flying energy, I would say that this is us, the collective, kind of moving over this space where it's like we're in it, not of it, jumping over it, jumping through it. And again, it's bringing me back to, I was saying earlier that science fiction movie thing where everybody gets put into cryosleep for the deep space journey because it's going to take 100 years, so we're just going to go into this little simulation and experience, you know, a week's worth of time or whatever it might be, a couple months, and then on the other side of it, we're through. It's like that's what I think is happening here. This is because these are actually right on top of where this is. That this is the base that we need cryo sleep for, same as this, storm fields, ghost lands, and then this is the cargo, effectively, which you could say is us, absolutely, but it's like, I feel like this is a thought form, where it's like a thought form that we don't even really have full knowledge of, where it's like, what is coming up about this thought form, about whatever it is that we're carrying, is very abstract, very dreamy, where, I mean, let's face it, as committed to the new timeline as you may be, maybe you've spent the last 100 years listening to Dolores Cannon and everything you could, it's still challenging to like visualize paradise, right? It's still hard to visualize a world that's different than the one that we're used to. At least I have trouble rendering that sometimes, and that's kind of what this is saying to me, is that it's very abstract, it's almost out of reach. But I feel like that's been absolutely necessary, because then it's not tainted. Like, this is just like a conversation that I've had with my friends a couple of times about like the time capsule idea, where it's like the time capsule cannot be opened in here, in this space that we're in, because even if I didn't share the master plan with anybody, it's like it would still be here. It's like that frequency would still be there. It's almost like it's classified, right? Because we're in like a sensitive space. We're amongst, I don't even want to say adversaries. I'm not even like feeling like, you know, somebody's trying to steal the plan, but it's just a matter of our own inner saboteur effing things up for us, because that's just how it seems to be sometimes. So that's why it's like this new timeline has been kind of contained in a type of way. But little by little, there are these glimpses, right? Like it flickers in a little bit, which is what I was saying with Field of Dreams and the Natural History Museum analogy of like seeing these vignettes of the new timeline behind glass, being able to observe but not being able to actually experience or occupy it. And it's fascinating because right after the flying card, we have sparks and deep freeze, right? So I was saying like the cryo sleep and sparks. So it's like I do feel as though we're coming out of this cryo sleep. Like this is just talking to me about defrosting, that kind of energy. And then slow and steady, which is next, is telling me the same thing. Like I feel like she's emerging from her shell, she's hatching. And these are the final two cards in the reading. It's slow and steady and education. And what this is talking to me about is development, where, for example, with a, what would you call it? With a chicken, right? These were all birds. With a chicken, or something that's coming out of an egg, my understanding is that you can't just crack the egg for the chick, right? The chick needs to break itself out of the egg. There's something crucial about that process that if it was expedited, if there was external assistance that it would like kill the chick somehow, or it wouldn't be able to develop properly, etc., etc. So there's something about that. There's something about this birthing process that it's like it's happening naturally. There's no cesarean with this one. It is full, just doing a full water birth, basically. And yeah, there's something about, again, like development, where you can see here, like she's reading this book. It almost looks like this is a stork too, right? I know it's probably more of like a egret or something. But with this book that she's sitting here and digesting, it made me think that like you don't just pick up a book and boom, digest it via osmosis, right? You have to read it one page at a time, one chapter at a time. If you want, you absolutely could watch, a 10-minute recap on YouTube or buy the Cliff Notes, but you're going to miss a lot of critical, subtle, nuanced aspects of the characters or the scene and setting that you just couldn't get from those abridged kind of versions. So there's something about that with this process where it's like, as we're doing our personal cleaning house, as we're doing that, it's like each chapter is kind of uploading. It's kind of like I was saying with the intention card, with this payload that we're trying to carry into the new world or whatever, that oh my god, that just fell out of my head as I was saying that. What was I trying to say? One chapter at a time, right? As we're cleaning house, each chapter is coming in, and this, it's like this. It's this story, right? Okay, now I remember what I was saying. How it's hard to visualize a perfect world. What does that look like? What does the process of even getting there look like? And this is kind of like the manual. I feel like that's really how this is coming through, like a user's manual, so to speak, that would very much so explain the space that we've been in. I mean, myself personally, I've learned so much about manifestation, about neuro-linguistic programming, about the power of language in general, affirmations, all of that stuff in the last 9 months because of everything that I was experiencing. And it made me realize that if I had lived this absolutely charmed life with never an issue, never this, never wanted for nothing, I don't think I would have ever actually explored those concepts or even really like thought about language or any of that kind of stuff, because it would have never been necessary. But it was like the struggle that I was experiencing made that absolutely necessary for me to try to unpack. And the circumstances that I went through forced me to learn that kind of stuff. And that's what I was saying here with this Ghostlands, where it was like the power of the now moment. Everyone, live in the now moment. And what does that mean? Right? It's so frustrating because it's like, how do I disconnect from my past? How do I not think about the future, right? But it's really just about being at peace with the now and being at peace with the past and trusting that, whatever is coming in the future is going to be great. Because again, it's this defrag process that we're going through, this cleaning house. And again, I just had to drop out of my head whatever I was going to say. Power of the now moment. Learning things one step at a time. Hey, mama. This is my cat, Luna, by the way. If you want to see her. Oh, hello. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. She's good. As we're passing through this space, I feel like we're actually recalibrating our relationship with the past, because there's been a lot of things for me, again, especially within the last 9 months, and I'm only using 9 months for myself because that's when I moved to a new location, so that's kind of like a marker for me. Personally, I think that this underworld process really kicked off in October of 2018. I'm just going to throw that out there, whatever that means for people, because I have a clear marker for that, where that only just kind of hit me yesterday or 2 days ago. There were a lot of 2018 synchronicities, and I was like, oh, ooh, that's interesting because X, Y, and Z. But in this Ghostland space that we're passing through, it's given us this opportunity to kind of, again, recalibrate our personal relationship with the past, with the future. Because for myself, I had a lot of resentment, jadedness, whatever you want to call it, where I was angry that, people didn't follow through on promises that they had made, right? Where, I was always expected to keep my word, but if somebody didn't keep their word, gaslighting kind of stuff, etc. So I was resentful that those things hadn't panned out, because I was coming at it from the perspective of thinking, if it had panned out, my life would be better. But I did a lot of work of like tracing out the timelines and realizing, oh snap, if that had happened, I would have never done this, and therefore I would have never met this person, who I'm so grateful to have met. And or if this had happened, I would have wound up here, and that would have been miserable, etc., etc. So I had this moment, like this aha moment of really unpacking that. And it changed my entire relationship to the past, where I realize now that if I were to sit down now and write my life story, I would write a completely different story than I would have written 9 months ago, simply because my perspective has changed completely, right? Whereas 9 months ago, I probably would have written a story where it's like I was the victim of these experiences and all of these oogie boogie men that showed up in my life that, it wasn't fair and blah, blah, blah. Whereas now I would look back and say, I'm a creator being, I'm the maestro of my reality, I've rendered just about everything that I've experienced. I really take full responsibility for my reality in that kind of way, where I personally believe that we render just about everything we experience, good, bad, and different. The only problem is that we don't know that we do it. No one's ever told us that we do it, right? They would rather us assume that we're powerless so that we render a circumstance where we're powerless. They would rather us assume that there's an adversary that we can't get beyond so that we render an adversary that we can't get beyond, right? It's like we are encouraged to render the obstacles that stop us, which is exactly what Coronzon does in the Stormfield's place. So that's why I would say, like, I don't think this is something we're moving into. I think this is something we've been in for quite a while. And perhaps it just gets denser as you move through it. I don't know. But it does seem like things are cracking. It's just that slow and steady kind of process of getting out of the shell, right? Because it's like I would have loved for somebody to come and crack all of this shell off me months or years ago, but perhaps I would not have been able to survive in the new environment that we're moving into, which again is kind of going back to this intention energy where I was saying that whatever's incubating here cannot hatch in this space because it would not be viable, right? It was also like I was saying, like the vignettes behind glass, it's like we can't actually occupy that space yet because we would carry the baggage from the old timeline into it. It's like it would be tainted or infected or corrupted or something, because it's like, again, it's the weighing the heart against the feather ceremony, the passing through the underworld. It's like if you still have illusions on your heart, you cannot pass through the underworld into the new space because you're going to carry that junk or baggage with you. So that's why it's like this has to be unknown. And that could even be the thing too, is that it's like there could be things that are out of sight, out of mind in terms of what's coming next, because we're trying to avoid projecting onto it. So it's still contained within this egg. And as long as like we don't have a point of reference for it, we can't corrupt it. Because that's been coming up for me since things started 2 years ago, that there's going to be some sort of curveball that, whether it's a personal curveball in your own personal narrative or something that the entire collective experiences, regardless, it is a curveball because it is not on anybody's bingo card. It is not something that has a tremendous amount of baggage attached to it, right? Like even the concepts of new earth, old earth, whatever you want, there's baggage attached to all of that. There's baggage attached to everything, right? Every kind of outcome, UFOs, all that stuff. It's baggage, baggage, baggage. But there are potentialities out in this great field, this field of dreams, right? There are potentialities that are not on the bingo card, that like we've never heard of before. No one expects it. No one's ever played out this story before. And quite frankly, I think in the last 2 years, there have been many stories that we've played out personally that we may not even realize have never been played out before. That we're at a point in the game that no one has ever gotten to before. So therefore, all of these old mythological stories, all of these old archetypes that have been stuck to us are breaking down one by one, because we've ventured into new territory where it's like you can't just, open up Homer's Odyssey and try to find this story in there. It's like it doesn't exist anymore. We've broken that down in such a way. So let me just see if there's anything else that I wanted to pull out of this. No, I think that might be good. I wanted this to be 20 minutes. It's 45 minutes now, so I did a great job. What can I say as like an advice? As an advice, oh, it's like I want to cry saying this. Kind of give yourself a break. You know, don't be so hard on yourself. It's like I don't want to say trust the process because that's so hard. But at least with this Ghostlands card, let me take a sip of coffee. Okay. Whatever it is that we've experienced has not been in vain. It's all had purpose. And I feel like I'm getting emotional just because I know how painful it's been for so many people. But there's something about perspective as well. I mean, I don't know where the Oracle card was that I had pulled. Actually, let me see if it's right behind me, because I do want to read it. Yeah, good, it was right behind me. So I pulled an Oracle card from my Beyond Lemuria Oracle cards by Izzy Ivy. And of course the card that I pulled was the Freedom card. So go figure. But this entire card is just about the power of perspective. How I was saying, like, healing the relationship with the past, healing the relationship with the future. How the life story book that you would write today is going to be completely different than the one that you would have written months ago, simply because your perspective has changed. And I'll just read this entire thing. It's, again, Freedom, this beautiful blue dragonfly, which reminds me of like ancestor energy personally. Okay, it says freedom. Freedom means living as you choose, with your wings and heart open, able to direct your reality as you want. The quest for freedom seems innate. You may picture freedom in its more extreme guises, but when we truly feel free, our lifestyles may not change drastically. Limitation can be a state of mind. The only change might be choosing to live a certain way rather than feeling obligated. Right? Choosing to live a certain way as opposed to feeling obligated to live a certain way. A shift of perspective can help bring lightness and choice. In the bigger picture, what does freedom look like to you? If you're feeling stifled, it's up to you to make a change. I mean, really, the thing that I pull out of this the most is that healing the relationship with the past, right? And it's interesting too, where it's like choosing to live a certain way, living intentionally as opposed to feeling obligated, where personally for me how that's played out has been shifting from like a victim mentality where it's like, oh, here I am, the victim of this matrix and all the evil architects inside of it, to kind of shifting to realizing, wait a second, I am the most powerful creator being in my reality. And yes, I fell for some foolishness, but I can still unrender, re-render, all of that. And I personally believe that even the past can be changed. Look at the Mandela effect, right? I mean, Exhibit A. But Exhibit B, personally, would be, I don't know if there's an actual name for this technique. I'm sorry if there is and I'm butchering it, but the way that I'm familiar with it is if maybe you had an injury that you sustained 10, 20 years ago, and the example that was given to me is like, you were jumping off of a swing set and you landed and you broke your ankle. And here it is 10, 20 years later, and now you still have an ankle problem, whatever that is. The technique is that you visualize that event, but you visualize it going differently. So now I'm visualizing jumping off the swing set and landing with a perfect 10. My feet are great, everyone's clapping, and we move on. And I keep doing that until the memory, that newly rendered memory, which is a false memory, but whatever you want to call it, until that replaces the old. And people have experienced like miraculous healings because of that technique. Vice versa, I've worked with some people trying to do healing where nothing could be done, nothing could be healed, because every single day, 10 times a day, they would repeat the story of all the traumatic things that happened to them that led to the injuries that they had or the illnesses that they had. And they lived in that story. And even though it had happened 30 years ago, their body experienced it 10 times a day as if it was fresh. And as much as I would try to say you need to let go of that story, they were the story, they needed the story. I have a story too, right? Where it's like I tell myself things all the time about, things I'm upset about or angry about or etc. And even when I'm trying to render a positive future, right, like off of this channel, right, I want to do this because I want to do this. I feel very called to do this. But then there's also the more 3D aspect of is it going to be financially viable and can I sustain myself and all of that. So it's like that kind of, and then that goes back to things of the past of if this had worked out and that had worked out and I'm angry about this and I'm angry. So it's like it fuses to this new thing where it's like I want to start this new timeline with this new enterprise, but I can't really fully start it as long as it's entangled with the old timeline. So it's like the perspective that I need to come into this with has to be one that's uncoupled from the story. Because for as long as I'm telling myself that old story, this is just going to be another chapter of it. But if I let go of that story and I start a new story, then this will be a completely new story with a completely new protagonist, right? And that's what I believe. I believe that each of us can become a completely new protagonist in our story simply by changing our relationship to the past. Because that's kind of how the old story ends, is you have that moment on the final page of the book where you realize, oh shit, I'm not the victim, I'm the maestro. Or I'm not, even if you don't want to take responsibility for all of these, fucked up things that we've experienced, it's that I'm not the victim, I'm bigger than that, or I'm not pathetic, right? I'm bigger than that. I have the power to change it. However it is that you want to say it, it's an affirmation that says, I have creative license to do as I please in this reality. I hope that I'm not saying that offensively. Okay, let me leave it there. Thank you so much. If you're interested in a personal reading, please reach out to me. Like I said, the information should be on the description box below. And hopefully I'll see you guys super soon. Bye.